It's my privilege to present the biography of today's webinar resource person Dr. Suja Abraham for the upskilling program on medication errors, identification, assessment, and reporting in tertiary care hospital, conducting pharmacy practice program under PCI regulations. Dr. Suja Abraham has done her B.Pharm from Dr. MGR Medical University in 2001 and did her professional diploma in clinical research in 2004, M.Pharm from Sri Ramachandra Medical College and Research Institute in 2005, and went on to go for PhD from Karpagam University, Coimbatore in 2014. Madam was a clinical pharmacist in Aster Medcity and made into academics as assistant professor at Amrita School of Pharmacy, Amrita Vishwavidyapeetham University, Amrita Institute of Medical Science, and for more than 5 years as associate professor at Nirmala College of Pharmacy, Kerala. Her professional doings are in setting up of hospital drug formulary. Her special areas of interest are identification of medication errors, adverse drug reactions, and drug-related problems, provision of pharmaceutical care to hemodialysis and renal transplant patients, anticoagulation management, dissemination of drug information to the doctors, the healthcare professionals, patients, and patient attenders. A mentor of repute she is to the students to train them to acquire clinical skills for pharmaceutical care and prepare them for evidence-based pharmacy practice. Madam, Dr. Suja has a membership of International Society of Pharmacoeconomics and Outcome Research, ISPOR, Inspection Committee, Kerala University of Health Sciences, Indian Association of Colleges of Pharmacy, Indian Hospital Pharmacist Association. She is a faculty advisor of ISPO student chapter, Kerala University of Health Sciences, which secured outstanding low middle income country student chapter award in 2019. She guided more than 20 research projects at MPharm and PhD levels and got research grants from Kerala State Council for Science, Technology and Environment. Madam is a journal reviewer of Journal of Pharmacology and Pharmacotherapeutics and Hemodialysis International Journal. She has to her credit the worth of about 50 publications, all in pharmaceutical care and in clinical pharmacy areas, published in journals of repute, and to name them few are Journal of Pharmacoepidemiology and Drug Safety, the Egyptian Heart Journal, Asian Journal of Pharmaceuticals and Clinical Research, Indian Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences, Indian Journal of Epilepsy, and so on. Socially, Madam role in rescue and relief program conducted in Kochi during the floods of August 2018 in Kerala is a landmark to her social contribution. Now I request Dr. Suja Abraham to present the upskilling program on medication errors, identification, assessment, and reporting in tertiary care hospital conducting pharmacy practice program.
Thank you so much, and a very good morning to the Principal Professor Dr. Said Abdulaziz sir and Shoharani ma'am, coordinators and faculty members of Deccan School of Pharmacy, and to the Miriam for an excellent introduction. So I'm so privileged to share this platform with Shoharani ma'am. So ma'am discussed most of the points related to the medication error. And thank you so much, ma'am, for initiating such an interesting as well as a thought-provoking environment for the delegates. So I'm not taking much time for the introduction. So let me share the screen now. So is it visible?
No, ma'am.
It's not coming?
Yes, not coming. I can try to share.
You need to share the screen first. Share the screen, then you have to go to the PPT.
Yeah.
Now it is visible.
Yeah, okay. I'm audible too, no?
Yeah, both things going fine.
Yeah. So as we know, medication error is not a new topic, but we know it's a vast topic. So I'll try to give a brief introduction or brief idea about the various types of medication errors, its identification, as well as the assessment and reporting of areas. So I'll try to complete the entire sessions within the allotted time limit. And to the organizers, please, if I am exceeding the time limit, please remind me. So this is a standard definition which is given by NCC-MERC, National Coordinating Council for Medication Error and Prevention. So they defined medication error as any preventable event that may cause or lead to inappropriate medication use or patient harm while the medication is in the control of the healthcare professional, patient, or consumers. So this is the standard definition. So I would like to stress on the word preventable. So preventable means what? Because mainly of the carelessness or the negligence of us, these types of errors are happening. So we must be very vigilant while analyzing the cases or analyzing the prescriptions. So if we look into the various journals, we can see that almost 6 to 7% of the hospital admissions, there appear to be medication related. So this is related mainly to the hospital admission. So there are so many errors which are not reported, as well as minor errors. Only the moderate as well as the serious errors are reported to the hospitals, and that leads to the hospital admissions. So there are many errors which are not noticed by the healthcare professionals. And if we look into the Indian scenario, we can see that we don't have a proper medication error reporting system, but still many studies are there which report the rate of errors happening all. So studies like these studies which I have quoted say they reported like almost 15 to 25% of the errors are happening in the hospitals. So many of the PharmD students are also doing some projects related to the medication errors, and through that we can identify the errors happening in the hospital settings. So if we classify the medication errors, broadly we can classify it into, as ma'am discussed, we can classify it into prescribing, dispensing, as well as administering. But other than that, if you do some root cause analysis, we can see that there are so much of errors like transcribing errors, monitoring errors, compliance errors, storage errors, and so on. So we'll see one by one. And before that, I'll just take your attention to England's National Reporting and Learning System, which have done in 2017-18, and they identified almost 237 million errors are happening worldwide. So they analyzed and they categorized the errors into mainly prescribing, administering, dispensing, and other types, transitioning, as well as monitoring errors. So the major types of errors which is happening in all over the world is administering error. Almost 54.4% of the errors are related to the administration errors, followed by prescribing and dispensing. But again, if we analyze, we can classify it into mild, moderate, and severe errors. So if we look into that section, we can see that most of the errors, serious as well as the moderate errors are happening in the prescribing side, followed by dispensing. But the administration errors, the moderate as well as serious errors are very less. And this could be the reason for major hospital admissions, prescribing as well as dispensing errors. Other than these three main classifications, some other medication errors like transitioning errors. Transitioning errors means there is a transition of care when the patient is shifting from one area to another, like one ward to the ICU or vice versa, or one location to the other location. If the proper advice is not given, proper handover is not taken, then there will be chances of medication error. So that leads to the transitioning error. And there will be monitoring error also, accounts for almost 7% of the errors. Again, they have done the classification based on the location. So primary care hospitals, they are having maximum number of errors happening, almost 38 primary care as well as the care homes. They have almost 38.3 and 41.7 errors are happening in these areas, followed by the secondary care areas. There is only 20% of errors. So one interesting fact is that the WHO wants to reduce severe avoidable medication-related harm globally by 50% by 2022. So 2022 means we don't have much time, only months left. So it's very important and we need to work hard to reach this target. So that's why these types of medication error related seminars are very essential in this scenario too. So we can classify medication errors into various types. And if we look into the literatures, we can see many types of studies are there. And this study I have taken from Chalasani et al. And they classified their errors into these many types. So we can see that administration errors are the most prevalent errors. Almost 38% of the errors are due to administration, followed by prescribing, dispensing, and other types. So this is one of the area where we are actually ignorant or neglecting the area. So always we are looking into the prescribing errors, whether the dose is correct, route is correct, or frequency is correct. All those things we will check. But the administration side, we'll never go into that, and we'll never see whether the reconstitution is proper, whether the diluent used is proper, and so on. So that's why we can see that maximum numbers of errors are happening in the administration side. So we'll see one by one. So I'll just explain few examples also along with each type. So first one is about the prescribing errors. So prescribing errors, the major reason for the prescribing errors are the incomplete as well as the unclear orders. That's a major contributing factor. And it could be like wrong drug or wrong frequency, wrong dose or wrong dosage forms. So I'll say some examples. One is like meropenem and piperacillin tazobactam. And these two antibiotics are the most commonly used antibiotics in our day-to-day life. So meropenem, we know usually it is prescribed as 1 gram TID in most of the cases. But according to the patient's conditions or the renal complaints, we may have to adjust the dose. So normally we'll give 1 gram twice daily for normal renally impaired patients. And if the patient is undergoing hemodialysis, they have to reduce the dose by 500 mg OD. So all these points about the condition, severity of the illness, condition of the patients, everything should keep in mind while prescribing the drug. Same way, piperacillin tazobactam, normal dose, we know it is a 4.5 gram thrice daily, and for renally impaired patients, it is reduced to 4.5 gram BD or 2.275 thrice daily. That is the dose adjustments we need to do. So all this frequency as well as the drug dose, we should know at least for common drugs that are seen in our prescriptions. Another example is nifedipine. And nifedipine, theophylline, all these types of products, we have different types of formulations available. Like retard combination, retard type is there, SR, ER, all these types of dosage forms are available. So if without knowing the retard as well as SR concept, nifedipine plain is also available. So plain, if you're prescribing for thrice daily, and nifedipine, it's for twice daily. That's the usual concept. So without concentrating on that part, if you are prescribing nifedipine retard for 3 times daily, it leads to medication errors. So overdose will be there. And some other drugs like metoprolol, tartrate, and succinate, we have different types of salt formations, like salt used. Tartrate and succinate, I just copied some pictures of that. So tartrate means it is an immediate release formulation, whereas it is a succinate is an extended release drug. So without writing this ER or tartrate succinate terms, simply if you're writing metoprolol alone, that can lead to dispensing error and at the same time administration errors too. So similarly, another types, diclofenac, this is also a common drug which we are come across in our daily life, which is also having 2 different salt form, sodium form as well as the potassium form. Potassium, it is not seen widely. Mainly it is used for immediate relief. It is an immediate release drug, which is mainly used for acute pain relief, whereas sodium is given for other inflammatory conditions. And one more example, that is methylprednisolone succinate and acetate formulation. Succinate we are mainly given for IV route, and it is a sustained release product, whereas acetate, which is mainly given for intra-articular injection or soft tissue injection. So the indication itself will change if the salt form is changed. So that is one of the major reasons for prescribing errors. So then we can see some of the prescriptions with wrong strength. Common example is Thyronome. Thyronome or levothyroxine, usually it is prescribed in micrograms, mcgs. But many a times, due to ignorance or not, some of the prescriptions we can see it is written as Tylenol MG. Even our students as well as the junior doctors are using these types of wrong strength of the medications. Then we can see the prescription errors, which is common in the special populations, especially the pediatrics as well as the elderly populations. They are the vulnerable population. So we need to be very careful while writing medication to these kind of patients. And there are off-label and unlicensed use of medicines. So one simple example and one is common example is pantoprazole. So pantoprazole, if you look into the labeling indications, we can see that it should not be used for pediatrics under 5 years. The reason is that we don't have that much of sufficient data to prove its safety as well as efficacy, as well as the dose of pantoprazole for pediatric of less than 5 years. So that's why we cannot use pantoprazole for such kind of patients. Instead of that, we can use ranitidine or we can switch to lansoprazole or so. So this is actually a common error. Many prescriptions we have seen with this kind of errors. And there are other errors in the special population like weight-related dose adjustments. Always we used to adjust the dose if it is a per kg it's a per kg basis. But there are situations when the patient is very obese and all, we need to calculate ideal body weight or lean body mass. So accordingly, we need to calculate. So fortunately, I have not come across with any type of this kind of obese patients where these dose calculations are necessary. But there are chances of medication errors if we are not calculating the ideal body weight for severely obese patients, especially for highly lipophilic drugs like anesthetic drugs or barbiturates and all. If we are not changing the weight of the patients or converting the weight into ideal body weight, chances of dose errors are very high. And then difficulty in administrations, that too in the pediatric population as well as the elderly population, they're very difficult to swallow the drugs in the tablet formulation. So without giving the proper formulation, the tablet, if you are prescribing, it's very hard for them to swallow the drugs. This is also a very common drug in pediatric populations. We have seen patients with seizures, febrile seizures and all, they are given clobazam as a prophylactic agent. So that too, half dose of the clobazam 5 mg. So it's very hard to break the drug and to give for a pediatric child under 5 years. So in all situations, we need to identify the situation of the patients too while prescribing a drug to the special population category. And then we need to concentrate on the special drugs like dialysable drugs. So this I have taken from one article. So this is, what they have done is they made a separate list for drugs which are dialysable, like antibiotics, all the antibiotics, vancomycin, gentamicin, all these drugs, we need to give the drug after the dialysis sessions. So instead of giving this drug after dialysis and if you're giving before that, there is no use. The drug is completely eliminated during the dialysis session. So it's very important to know what are all the drugs that are completely dialysable and what to do in case of these situations. So this you can practice in your settings too. So whenever the students go for rounds or when they are deputed in the nephrology department or dialysis settings, you need to prepare the drugs which are dialysable and drugs which are contraindicated, drugs which need modifications in case of renal failure, as well as those who need dialysis. So separate list you need to prepare and you need to cross-check it, cross-check with the drugs given so that you can identify so many errors from each prescriptions. It's not that our prescriptions are completely error-free. Our prescriptions, if we analyze from each and every prescriptions, we can identify many errors, including dose error or these kind of errors or then monitoring errors. So many errors we can identify from each prescriptions. And this is also another drug, a special drug, warfarin. You may be knowing this, but still I'm reminding you. So have you come across with any prescriptions like 4x5 or 3x4 or 5x6 like that? So it doesn't mean that warfarin we need to divide into 5 many sections and give 4 sections like that. It's not like that. So warfarin, it is very special drug in such a way that we cannot increase or decrease the dose of warfarin by simply seeing the INR, and simply we can reduce the dose of the next dose. Usually the warfarin dose is adjusted on the weekly basis. We know when the patient is taking warfarin, we need to identify, we need to check the INR, and usually the INR will be in the range of 2 to 3. If it is less than 3 or less than 2, we need to increase the dose. And if it is more than 3, we need to decrease the dose. You know the complications associated with the use of warfarin therapy, which is a narrow therapeutic index drug. So we can increase the weekly dose only. So how can we increase the weekly dose? So imagine a patient who is taking warfarin 5 mg. So warfarin 5 mg means the patient is taking 5 mg on 7 days. So totally, how much will be the dose? 5 into 7, 35. So 35 mg of warfarin the patient is taking. Then if the INR is increased to more than 3.5, we need to decrease the dose by 10 to 15%. Usually the increase or decrease of the warfarin dose is by 10 to 15% on the weekly basis. So how can we decrease the dose? So 35 is the usual dose and 10% of the weekly dose means 3.5. So 3.5 has to be reduced from the total weekly dose. So it will be around 31.5. So how can we give 31.5 to the patient? So we'll prescribe like 4 by 5. So 4 mg has to be taken for first day, 5 mg on the second day, third day again 4 mg, next day 5 mg, like that we need to take. So ultimately, if we calculate the dose, 4 mg has been taken by 3 days and 5 mg has been taken by 4 days. So if we calculate 4 into 3, 12, whereas 5 into 4, 20. So the total dose will be 32. So if we increase by 10 percentage, it is 31.5, and now we are giving 32. So that is the usual prescribing of warfarin. So this is another area. If we ask for other drugs, we cannot increase or decrease the next day dose by checking the INR levels. So always we need to do the dosage adjustment according to the weekly basis. And next type of prescribing errors are due to contraindications. Mainly for patients who are having liver failure or renal failure, many of the drugs are contraindicated. So we need to check whether the drug is contraindicated for a liver impaired patients. In such conditions, if you're giving the drug, it may lead to serious errors. So if the patient is having a liver failure, we should not give atorvastatin or azithromycin, and especially tramadol in the ER formulation. It should not be given. Same way, renal failure, metformin is contraindicated. I hope you know all these things. That's why I'm skipping these things a little bit faster way. Then another thing is drug duplication. So drug duplication means we know many of the times we can see drugs like pantoprazole and domperidone, PAN-D will be there. And along with that, another drug like domperidone separately or pantoprazole separately, that is also prescribed. So without knowing or unknowingly, these types of combinations are prescribed in the prescription. We can see in the prescription chart. And again, Ecosprin Gold. Ecosprin Gold contains aspirin, clopidogrel, as well as atorvastatin. And again, atorvastatin is prescribed. So we have come across with many cases like this. So sometimes it is a needed drug. Sometimes it's due to an error. So we need to check whether it is an intended drug or not. If the patient is having a severe nauseated feeling, then pantoprazole domperidone combination is necessary, and along with we need to give one more domperidone drug. So based on the condition of the patients only, we can identify whether the drugs prescribed is a really intended one or it's a mistake. And Ecosprin Gold, that's also, we know if the patient has undergone any PTCA, that is angioplasty, they have to take atorvastatin at a higher dose, almost 40 mg or 80 mg doses necessary. So if you check the strength of atorvastatin and Ecosprin Gold, it is only 20 mg. So the patient has to take additional atorvastatin. So that's not an error, but there are situations where these types of errors can also happen. But there are few exceptions too. Like warfarin, if you are prescribing warfarin, we need to give unfractionated heparin or low molecular with heparin during the initiation phase. Why? Because warfarin, we know it is an anticoagulant, but its full antithrombotic effect will be exerted only after 8 to 15 days of initiation. So to attain this, we need to give other drugs like ultra unfractionated heparin or low molecular weight heparin too, along with warfarin. So the half-life of warfarin is very high, almost 30 to 80 hours, and the duration is also prolonged almost 2 to 5 days. So in such situations, we need to give 2 drugs of the same category, and that cannot be considered as a drug duplication. And another type of error which is very common is administration through NG tube. This can be considered as an administration error too, but at the same way, it is a prescription error too. Knowingly, so by seeing the patient with an NG tube, the doctor cannot prescribe the SR formulations. In such situations, doctor has to switch over the formulations into the normal drugs. So if we are crushing and giving through NG tube, its intended effect may not be exerted. So here also I am taking the same example, pantoprazole. So why I am taking pantoprazole as a common example for most of the cases means that is the most common drug prescribed and the least bothered drug. So we are not bothered about the pantoprazole dose or its combination or its formulations and all. So that's why I'm stressing pantoprazole for most of the examples. So pantoprazole, which is an entry-coated tablets, and it's of no use if you are crushing the drug and giving through the NG tube. Instead, we can give pantoprazole as an IV formulation, or we can switch over to the ranitidine formulation. So this can also be considered as a type of prescribing error. And this is one interesting topic. So I can just explain a little bit slowly. So drugs like parenteral oral conversion. So whenever a patient is administered an parenteral drug, as a pharmacist, we need to check the reason or necessity of continuing the drug, whether the equivalent oral drug is available. Same way here also, I am taking the example of pantoprazole, the study by switching between IV and oral pantoprazole. So in this study, what they have done is, they have given 7 days oral therapy, and the maximal acid output has been measured, and it is in the range of 16 milliequivalents per hour. And the 40 mg also, it's in the range of 6 or 7. And they've given IV drug that is in the blackish color, and the IV has been continued for next 7 days. Again, the MAO has been checked. You can see that even though mild difference is there in between these 2 formulations, that is not a significant one. So this white one represents the placebo, the no drug has been taken. So the MAO has been very highly elevated. So if we look into the oral formulations as well as the IV formulation, there is no much difference in the acid suppression. So if the patient is prescribed with parenteral pantoprazole, easily we can request the prescriber to convert to the oral formulation, provided the patient is fit to give oral drugs. If the patient is taking other oral drugs, taking food orally, and the patient is stable, then surely we can convert the parenteral form into an oral formulation. So this is a list prepared by one of the main hospitals. So what they have done is, they have made a list of drugs which is having IV PO equivalents. So 1:1 equivalent. So same dose can be given as the IV drug as well as the same dose for the oral drug also. So this list has been made, and they always cross-checked with this list with the prescribed drugs. So whenever any of the drugs listed in this list is prescribed to any patients, they surely discussed with the prescriber for the possibility of changing into oral formulation. So here, this also you can practice in your settings. So the drugs which is having an equivalence of 1:1, you can without any hesitation, you can recommend the physicians to change into the oral formulation. So if it is in the oral formulations, you can reduce the number of, you can reduce the cost of the medication as well as the number of injections too. So we know the cost associated with IV medication is very high compared to the oral formulation. Administration charges also will be there if you are giving IV medication. So all this can be minimized, and unnecessarily the patient has to be in the hospital. So the hospital cost again increases. So all these things can be minimized if that can be converted into the peroral formulation. So like this, you just try to make a list with you so that it's very easy while you are analyzing the cases. Then about the parenterals, while writing any parenteral medication, it is necessary to write the administration instructions too. If we are not mentioning the instructions, there are chances of administration errors, like infusion rate or duration of infusion. So like infusion at 10 ml per hour or 100 ml per hour or infuse over 4 hours. If those types of instructions are necessarily to be written in the prescription along with each IV medications. And there are drugs which are having wrong abbreviations like HCT, CPZ, ACT. So these HCT, you can see H, C, and T. These three letters can be there in the hydrocortisone as well as the hydrochlorothiazide. So there are chances of dispensing errors as well as the administration errors if we are using these types of wrong abbreviations. And trailing zeros and leading zeros, you know, for 10 mg, if you are writing 10.0 mg, point may not be seen by the dispensing pharmacist or an administering nurse. So there are many incidents happen, and it is all listed in ISMP, Institute of Safe Medicine Practice. If you look into that site, you can see many errors which are due to this kind of trailing errors or leading zero errors. One common example is in insulin. Insulin, instead of 1 units, if we write 1 U as a wrong abbreviation, units instead of writing unit, if we use U, the nurse may administer 10 units by misreading as U into 0. So imagine if instead of 1 unit, 10 units is administered, the patient will end up with severe hypoglycemic attack. So this kind of errors has to be minimized by using proper abbreviations as well as having without using any trailing zeros and adding the leading zeros. So these are the major types of prescribing errors, and actually these are not the complete one. We are just picking the main or core concepts only. And if we analyze, we can see many errors which are causing prescribing errors, and we can talk more time on the prescribing errors or each types of errors. So due to time limit, we'll just focus on the important factors only. So next type of errors is transcribing error. So transcribing error, mainly it is due to incomplete or illegible prescriber orders or as well as the nurse's handwriting. And this can lead to many error-prone dispensing or error related in the administration. So, and the use of error-prone abbreviations, as we discussed in the previous slide, this can also lead to transcribing errors. And the patients who are involving in the transcribing, if they are not knowing the drug name or dose or the frequency, the chances of transcribing is also very high. So I'll just want to bring your attention to one incident happened few years back in Kerala. So the title of this news is like, Destiny appeared as planned for the monoact. Student died due to wrong medicine administration. So here what happened is, it's a 17-year-old boy who was doing his +2, and he has planned to do a monoact in his college fest. But the theme what he was selected for the monoact is about the administration error. So he planned to do one drug which is mistakenly administered to a patient, and patient ended up in death. That was the theme he planned for the monoact. But the same situation happened in his life before enacting the program on the day of fest. So here what happened is, few days before his presentation, he had a severe abdominal pain. So he went to the one of the local hospital and did some scanning and all, and they suggested him to consult with senior, some more advanced hospital. So he went to another leading hospital. And After doing many MRI scanning and all, they identified that it's a pancreatic cyst, little bit big in size, and they suggested to do surgery as soon as possible. So the patient was admitted in the hospital for surgical clearance, and the doctor visited the patient in his bedside and forgot to write a drug which is a vaccine like Pneumovax, pneumococcal vaccine. Usually we'll give to give fitness for the surgery. Doctor actually forgot to write during his rounds, and he recollected only after coming to his OP consultation room. So immediately he just telephoned to the nurse's station, and one junior nurse picked the phone, and doctor informed the nurse to administer injection Pneumovax IM, but the nurse understood that it is Neovax, and she transcribed like this, and that prescription was transferred to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist told the nurse that we don't have injection Neovax, we have only injection Neovic. Neovic is becuronium bromide, which is a neuromuscular blocking agent. But the pharmacist added one point, like you just consult with the doctor whether the intended drug is Neovic or not. Nurse again called the phone, telephoned the doctor, but since the doctor was busy with the OP patients, he could not pick the phone. And the nurse told the pharmacist to dispense injection Neovic itself. So pharmacist dispensed injection Neovic. Nurse administered as the doctor's order this Neovic through IM route. So we know injection Neovic, it's for IV use only. So when this drug was administered, immediately the patient had seizure-like episodes, and the skeletal muscle paralysis as well as the respiratory paralysis happened, and within hours the patient had brain death. So while reading this news, it was very heartbreaking to see this case. And it is clearly written in one of the textbook of Dr. K.G. Ravikumar, and he clearly explained all these incidents in a very detailed manner. So next is dispensing error. So dispensing errors, like the common dispensing errors is look-alike and sound-alike drug, LASA. So I hope many of you might be knowing this, so I'm not concentrating much on that. You know, look-alike, even ma'am is also described describe these things. Some drugs which is mainly due to the packaging features, they are look-alike, or due to the similarity in appearance, they'll be look-alike. And there are drugs which are sound-alike. So simple example, nifedipine, nicardipine, all these drugs. So and mistakenly, the pharmacist, due to his busy schedule and all, they may dispense these kind of look-alike and sound-alike drugs, which may lead to serious errors. And other examples for dispensing errors are dispensing an expired or almost expired medicine. This also ma'am discussed, like dispensing an expired medication means rather than causing an intended effect of positive effects, it leads to negative effects. ADAs may happen. So it's very important to check the expiry date before dispensing. Then substituting a medicine of inferior quality. So we know we have n number of n number of manufacturing units, and we have n number of products too. So by knowing, so if you are analyzing the active pharmaceutical content of different brands, we can see that many of the products may not have the prescribed content in the drugs. So by knowing that the drug is not having any quality or it's not having that much of content, we should not substitute a medicine with the inferior quality drug. And I would like to stress on more regarding this point, like dispensing without proper information. Actually, this is the very common type of error which we are facing. And even as a pharmacist, we may not be knowing these things when we may not advise the patients to take the medication with its proper information. One is photosensitive drugs. We know many drugs like tetracycline, amiodarone and all. If we are taking these drugs, we should not expose to the sunlight. So how many of us explain these things to the patients? So if we are not explaining, all these things will end up with severe types of photosensitive reactions. and then dilute with water like electrolyte syrup KCl. If you are using without diluting with water, it can lead to gastric irritations or skin irritations and too. Always it has to be taken with 1 glass of water. Then other types before food, with food, on empty stomach, all this kind of information. I think this somewhat we are explaining like sulfonylureas and all we should take advised to take before food, and but with food we may not explain like phosphate binders. If you're taking calcium acetate and all, that has to be taken with first mouth of food. I don't know whether these kind of information are passing to the patients. So always patients will take after food only. And there are drug food interactions too. So even though it's not, we cannot consider it as a dispensing error, but as a pharmacist, we should always counsel the patient and also inform the patient to check the drug food interactions. And we need to advise the patient the drugs which are not to be taken with some sort of food items. Then another interesting fact is regarding the drug name suffixes. We have come across with many products with MD, DT, ODT, ER, SR formulations. And DT means the dispersible tablets. It's not supposed to swallow as a whole. And that also is a neglected area where the patients are not advised properly about the proper administration of this kind of drugs. So the drug may be a pretty big one. So a patient with much difficulty, they swallow the drug instead of dissolving in 1 glass of water. And some mouth dissolving drugs, they'll just swallow. They won't dissolve it in the mouth. So all these types of errors can happen by inappropriately we are counseling the patients or not giving that much of information or passing the information to the patient. Then dispensing to the wrong patient. So this actually, this is from my own experience I'm telling. So we had a separate anticoagulation clinic. So all the patients who are taking warfarin, after getting the medicine from the pharmacy, they used to come to us, and we used to give the advice of warfarin therapy. So we know each other because very less number of patients only taking warfarin. So we know each other. So one patient, one day he came to me with another set of medications. So I know that warfarin was not prescribed for the patient. So when I asked, he said, this is the drug which I've dispensed from the pharmacy. Suddenly I rushed to the pharmacy and I have seen that with the same name, another patient is waiting and the warfarin drug was waiting for that patient. Luckily, it was not dispensed so that we could identify before the error before reaching to the patient. So these kind of errors are very common, and especially the drugs with the narrow therapeutic index or special drugs like warfarin and all, if you are dispensing to the wrong patient, it may lead to severe reactions. And another interesting area is about the storage. Even though we cannot consider it as a dispensing error, I would like to mention it here because if we look into the storage requirement of lorazepam alone, it may not be visible like in the storage formulation. So only the lorazepam injection has to be stored in the refrigerator, whereas hello?
Yes, madam, you are audible.
Now only?
Just for a few seconds only.
Okay. So this slide, have you heard about this slide?
Yes.
Okay. So the storage, we need to store the drug, especially the IV formulations, store in the refrigerator, whereas for tablet formulations, we can store it in the normal room temperature. So next we can see the administration errors. So as we see, most of the errors are due to administration errors. So administration errors, if we look into the literature, most of the errors are related to the administration errors. Already we have discussed that. So out of that, 41% or 42% of the errors are dose errors. And again, the errors are during IV bolus administrations. It accounts for almost 73% of the errors. And we can see that out of all these IV bolus administrations, all the injections are injected faster than the recommended time. So this has been reported in many studies. And we can see other types of administration errors, almost 49% of the errors are due to reconstitution errors. So if we analyze all the types of administration errors, the most common errors are in the wrong diluent mixture, wrong diluent volume, wrong bolus rate, and drug incompatibility. These 4 errors are the major reasons for administration errors, which accounts for almost 91% of the errors, and out of which 27% of the errors were considered as serious errors. So we'll see another example of administration errors, which is wrong drug or wrong dose or concentration or administering through wrong route. So one example is amphotericin B. So the doctor prescribed amphotericin B alone. He didn't mention liposomal or it's a conventional form. So since it is not written as liposomal, nurse administered the conventional formulation. So if we look into the dose of liposomal as well as the conventional drug, liposomal, the maximum dose is 5 mg per kg per day. So for this patient, the doctor prescribed the dose as, for a 60 kg patient, the 5 mg dose is prescribed. So a total of 300 mg he mentioned in the prescription chart. But unknowingly, the nurse administered the conventional drug, which is having a maximum of dose 1.5 mg per kg per day only. So conventional drug 300 mg was administered to a patient, and immediately the patient developed tachycardia and ECG changes. Luckily, this patient was admitted in the ICU. So all the monitoring has happened throughout the day, so that these kind of errors could identify at that point of time. Itself. So they identified the error, and amphotericin, it is a non-dialysible drug. So what we can do is only plasmapheresis. So they have done the removal of plasma so that the patient could be, the condition is resolved and patient survived. And this is one of the error happened in our own hospital. So this kind of errors, which is of, since if you are checking the product itself, we can see that both the products contain same dose. So here also it is written as 50 mg, here also 15 mg. So nurses, she doesn't know that these two formulations are available and there is this much of dose verification, dose changes are there in the required dose. So unknowingly, she administered the wrong drug, which is ended up with the patient harm. And another example is of wrong rate of administration. So this is actually one example of vancomycin. So vancomycin, we know it has to be administered very slowly. At least 1 hour we need to administer the drug. So if we increase the rate of administration, it can lead to Redman syndrome. Redman syndrome, it's purely an administration related ADR due to the faster administration. So here what happens is upper part of the body, especially the trunk as well as the face, will be appear as red in color. So this kind of red rashes will be formed. So always we should check the rate of administration too, in case if it is an infusion. Then we can see wrong diluent or incorrect reconstitution. So normally if you see the reconstitution of products, almost all of the products are, most of the products are reconstituted in normal saline. But some drugs, it should not be reconstituted. So here, for example, norepinephrine, it has to be reconstituted in drugs, diluents such as 5% dextrose or sterile, but for injection. So here the dextrose, it reduces the loss of potency due to the oxidation of norepinephrine. So instead of using 5% dextrose, if you are using NS, leads to loss of potency and patient may not get the intended effect. So this also we should check while analyzing the administration errors. So this is from another study. So here what they have done is they also made a list like this, considering the pH of the product. So what are all the diluents that can be used, then how it should be administered, like direct infusion, direct injection or IV infusion, how long it has to be taken, then with the product is having any light sensitivity, all those things. So like this, you can also prepare a list of drug, and you need to cross check it with all sort of drugs which needs dose dilution or reconstitution, and if it is an infusion, we need to check the infusion rate too. And then another one more point is there regarding the stability that I'll tell later. Next type of administration error is improper recording after drug administration. So immediately after administering the drug, the nurse has to write in her own nurse's note, and she has to put her signature. So if she forgot to mention the signature, that means the drug is not administered. So the next nurse who comes after her schedule, she also may administer the drug. So the drug duplication may happen. So in order to avoid that, after each administration, nurse has to put her signature in the nurse's chart. And there are drugs which need the timing of administration, the drugs which need time critical medicines or non-time critical scheduled medications. That means some of the drugs simply, if you say warfarin, we know the times it is prescribed for 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or so. So on that particular time itself, we have to administer the drug. That is called time critical. So maximum half an hour deviation is allowable for time critical medicines. Whereas non-time critical medications, we can allow almost 2 hour deviation from the prescribed time of administration. So non-time critical, example for non-time critical medication is the drugs which are prescribed for once daily or once weekly drugs. Once daily, it's not warfarin. Warfarin, even though it is a once daily drug, we need to stick on to the time. But some vitamin supplements or that kind of drugs, it's not so necessarily to administer on correct 8 o'clock or 10 o'clock or so on. And drugs like methotrexate, that has to be taken once weekly. So that in that situation also, minor deviation is allowable. But time critical means if the prescribed drug is for 4 times or 6 times, then we need to stick on to the particular time itself. Otherwise, we cannot finish all the scheduled drug within the time limit. So time critical means the drugs which need immediate effect as well as multiple frequency, and then special drugs like warfarin. All other drugs will come under once daily drugs as well as once weekly drugs comes under non-time critical medications. And another reason for improper recording is unlabeled or mislabeled syringes. So after loading the drug in the syringes, if it is not labeled, there will be chances of administering to the wrong patient or wrong medication. This is very important, that is storage or stability after reconstitution. So most of the products after reconstitution, they have to store in refrigeration. So one exclusion is acyclovir. So acyclovir, if you store in the refrigerator, it may cause some precipitation. So acyclovir is stable in the room temperature for almost 12 hours. So stability, actually, many of the products, they have stable in room temperature for almost 4 hours or 6 hours or so. So you should keep in mind that that has to be used within the prescribed time without losing its stability. Next is about the incompatibility at Y site. So here we can see many drugs, if you're administering through the same route, it can cause some precipitate formation, especially calcium, phosphorus, and these drugs, if you are administering through the same IV set, it can cause some precipitations. Calcium phosphate precipitate can be formed. So that also you should check whether there is any chance for precipitate formation. So all these things, if we closely monitor, we can easily identify these kind of errors. So here are our role starts. Usually it is the area where nobody is interested and nobody is keenly observing. So as a pharmacist, we need to check each and every medications, especially the parenteral medications administering. We need to closely monitor the drugs. Then few other drugs like subcutaneous injections, insulin, which is a common example, which is mainly prescribed for most of the patients, and the patient themselves are administering the drug. So while giving this drug, we are explaining the patients everything like the site of administration, how to administer, how to take the needle, how to hold the needle, everything we'll explain. But one point we forgot to explain to the patient, like leakage of insulin. So after the insulin injection, insulin administration, the needle has to be in that place for additional 5 to 10 seconds. So immediately if you are removing the needle, there is a chance of leakage of insulin. So this also has to be educated to the patients at the time of insulin counseling. Then another type of administration error is due to administration medications via feeding tube. This already we discussed at the time of prescription errors, drugs which are not to be crushed or chewed. If we are sustained release formulations like that, if we are crushing and giving through the feeding tube, it can be considered as an administration error. At the same time, it is a prescription error too. Then comes the monitoring errors. So is it exceeding the time limit?
No, proceed. Proceed.
So monitoring errors, one main type of error is due to the failure to monitor the medication effects. So if you are not checking the medication levels or blood levels in the body, or checking but not reacting to that, if the value is very critical, like potassium, it is more than 5 or 6, and if the critical values are not obtaining and not reacting to that, it can lead to the monitoring errors. And serum electrolyte levels, patient is prescribed with the digoxin or furosemide, and the potassium levels are not monitoring, that is called monitoring errors. And same way we need to monitor the renal function test as well as the liver function test too. Then we can see the administration of insulin, which leads to 33% of medical error, and which leads to death within 48 hours of the error, which is a common error due to the monitoring, which comes under the monitoring error. So I to come across with one type of many incidents related to that. So especially insulin, but we are giving at the night dose, by 2 or 3 a.m., the glucose level will be very low. And if we are not checking the blood glucose level at that point of time, there will be severe hypoglycemic attack, and the patients may go to the comatose state, and death can occur due to the administration of insulin at the night time. So we had many incidents happened like this. Even though the death was not happened, severe hypoglycemic attack, almost 40, 30 in that range, the blood sugar level has been come down. So what we made an modification, like whoever is prescribed with insulin has to be monitored the glucose, serum glucose, the POC, that blood glucose level at 3 a.m. too. And if it is too low, we have to include we need to give 25% dextrose, so that we can minimize these types of errors. Then we can see the incorrect transcription or interpretation of the laboratory data. So even though we are checking the blood glucose level, but giving the wrong amount of corrective or sliding scale insulin. So patients who are admitted in the hospital, always at the time of before giving the insulin, we will check the blood glucose level, and according to that, we'll correct the dose, and that is called sliding scale insulin. And if we are giving the wrong amount of this insulin without reacting to the blood glucose level, that can be a monitoring error. Then in some cases, by analyzing the lab parameters, we may have to do some calculations. So one example is calcium levels in the renal failure patients. So calcium, simply we are monitoring the serum calcium levels that cannot be the same for the renal failure patients. So for them, we need to do the corrected calcium levels by checking the albumin level too. So the equation used is 0.8 into 4 minus albumin plus serum calcium. So by checking the corrected calcium levels, we can add the phosphate binders, whether it is a calcium based or non-calcium based, that can be given to the renal failure patient. So these kind of calculations to be done by monitoring the blood levels. errors can happen without checking this corrected calcium level, looking into the plain serum calcium level and reacting to that means lead to some monitoring errors. Then as Shavarani ma'am mentioned, there will be some incorrect timing of monitoring, especially while we are doing this TDM. So TDM, we know we need to do the peak and trough level. So we should know at what time interval we need to do the peak concentration monitoring as well as the trough monitoring. So if it is not doing it at the proper time, it can be considered as a monitoring error. And the other things like blood glucose level is taken at wrong time intervals, like postprandial blood sugar. So immediately after taking food, if you are taking the PPBS, there will be some error. Or at the same time, if you are taking the PPBS after 4 hours or so, that's also no point in doing that. Then lipid profile, we know lipid profile, we have to check with empty stomach. Without having food, we need to do the fasting lipid profile has to be done. So these are related to the timing of monitoring. Then before chemotherapy, we need to do the absolute neutrophil count. So after checking the absolute neutrophil count only, we can fix the chemotherapy, next chemotherapy cycle. So all these things are related to the timing of monitoring. Next types of errors are due to the toxicity while administering electrolytes. So the electrolytes, while we are administering, we need to check the, we need to monitor many conditions like, for example, if you're administering IV magnesium sulfate, it can cause these kind of symptoms like hypotension, bradycardia, respiratory depression, all these types of symptoms can occur. So this should be monitored at defined intervals, that is every 15 minutes for the first hour and every 30 minutes for the second hour and then hourly. So then only if there is any changes happens in these patients, it can be easily identified and corrected. And the last type of error is compliance error. So compliance error, if you look into the literatures, we can see almost 20 to 59% of the patients are, elderly patients are having these types of compliance error. And the main reasons could be they're staying alone or due to the financial reasons or forgetfulness. That is the main reason. Or they don't have any nearby pharmacies, and sometimes they are apprehensive to take the medications because some psychiatric medications, and the patient is not willing to take that kind of medication. So, and they may be in the depressed state. So all this can be a reason for non-compliance. And some other medications like digoxin, methotrexate and all. Digoxin, we know it has to be taken 5/7, 5 days in a week and 2 days drug holidays. And they may not be remembering this, and they will be taking on a continuous basis. Nitrate holidays. So all these errors can happen, especially in the elderly populations. And methotrexate, we know it's a once weekly regimen. So without concentrating on that, patients may take methotrexate on daily basis. So this is also an experience. I had an experienced patient had taken methotrexate daily and ended up with severe mucositis and all. So within 2-3 days, patient has to be admitted in the hospital for severe reactions. So, and sometimes since it is a once weekly regimen, patient forgot to take the medications too. So these are comes under compliance errors. So how can we minimize it? So these are all the main errors. So by doing the root cause analysis, we can identify the error where the area this error is happening, and by doing the corrective measures, we can minimize the errors. So according to me, these are the main strategies we can do to minimize the medication errors. One is clinical pharmacists. We are the apt persons to reduce the medication errors. So if we are in the allotted unit for throughout the day, so if we are posted in a particular ward and we are supposed to do some sort of activities in that ward, means from morning to evening with full dedication, we need to be there and we need to be at the patient bedside and check the medications at the nurses station. So in that ward itself, we need to spend time so that each and every errors can be easily identified and minimized before reaching to the patients. And there are some other technologies like computer technology, and based on these root cause analysis, by identifying the proper reason for the errors, we can conduct many educational programs too. So the role of pharmacist starts with medication reviews and reconciliation. So even though the patient is admitting at late evening and all, by seeing the patient itself, by early morning, the pharmacist has to be in the ward, check the medications, conduct the medication history interview, do all the reconciliation process, and then before going to the ward rounds, collect all the information related to the patient. So what are all the medication the patient is taking, what are all the lab parameters monitored, and is there any critical values? So all these things has to be identified, and the pharmacist has to be proactively interact with the patient, interact with the clinicians at the ward rounds. And we know we are the experts in the pharmacology, so you should have the thorough knowledge in pharmacokinetic profile too. So the dose frequency that everyone can easily access from the internet too. So pharmacokinetic profile is that ADME process is the area where we are strong enough. So we should acquire maximum knowledge in that area, and that should be applied in the clinical practice too. And as a pharmacist, we have to prepare specific list pertaining to our situations, like high alert medications, do not crush drugs, infusion guidelines, protocols, dose calculation charts. All these things can be prepared by a pharmacist. And with this, if you are analyzing each cases easily, we can identify errors as well as the minimizing errors. These many guidelines like this you can access from ISMP site, Institute of Safe Medicine Practice. And with that, if you are analyzing, the errors can be minimized. Then it's our responsibility to participate in the antibiotic stewardship program too. And unnecessary prescription of the antibiotics can be restricted, and you can give, you can suggest to give prescriber privileges, like only the consultants or senior consultants are allowed to prescribe restricted antibiotics like warfarin, meropenem, all those kinds of restricted antibiotics, so that the resistance can be minimized, as well as the unnecessary prescribing of antibiotics can also be minimized. Then always, as a pharmacist, we should work in collaboration with hospital pharmacists too. So it's our ability to frame a hospital formulary, and it should be keep in mind that only the number of brands in the particular generic drug should be limited to 2 or 3. If more number of medications are included in the hospital formulary, it's very difficult to identify the drugs as well as to store the drugs too. So always we should keep in mind to limit the brands to 2 or 3. Then to minimize, to reduce the risk of lookalike as well as lookalike drugs, mainly we need to purchase the drugs from different manufacturers. So if you look into the lookalike drugs, most of the drugs are look similar in their packages. So if they are buying from different manufacturers, that kind of errors can be minimized. And then store drugs in separate areas, especially sound-alike drugs. If you are storing in separate areas and using the Tolman lettering. Tolman lettering means acetol, nifedipine, nicardipine. So only 1 or 2 letters are different. So nifedipine in that FE and nicardipine in that CAR, those 3 different letters to be highlighted in the capital letters. So Tolman lettering can be practiced, and this can also be reduced, help to reduce the medication errors. Next, we can rely on the computer technology, that is about automated information system. So if the hospital is using computerized provider order entry, CPOE, or what to call EMR, electronic medical record, the prescription error as well as the transcribing error can be minimized. And if that electronic medical record is incorporated or with any of the drug information softwares, so all the clinically relevant warnings will be pop-ups, like allergy history or the dose, drug interactions, and the anticoagulants. All these things can be pop up, and so that errors related to the dose or dosage forms, all these errors can be minimized, and then we can identify whether the drug is available in our pharmacy too. So that is also a main application of computer technology to minimize the errors. Then, as I told earlier, we need to do some educational programs by doing root cause analysis. And based on that, we can give education to the healthcare professionals. It's like dose calculations and infusion protocol guidelines. So these are the areas where most number of errors are happening. So these kind of educational activities can also be conducted for healthcare professionals. Then for patients also, we should educate related to the medications, their precautions, drug interactions, and then devices, especially inhalers, insulin pens. If the patient is using these types of devices, we need to do the proper counseling too. And eye drops, we know it's a sterile preparation which is not having any bactericidal agent. So once it is open, it can be used only for 1 month. So what we are doing by checking the expiry date, so we are using it till its last drop. We'll share with our family members, we'll share with our neighborhood, everywhere. So it's not the practice, it should not be the practice. So once it is open, within 1 month, we have to discard the remaining drug. So that kind of information also should be passed while doing the patient education. Then need of periodic monitoring parameters like those on warfarin need to be monitored INR on a continuous basis. Then we should share our experience to the regional forums or meetings, and we need to educate or train our junior staffs too, in order to not to repeat the same time. Whether the time is exceeding, sir?
No, proceed, madam.
Then some patient safety incidents and indicators can also be measured annually. So based on that, we can do some analysis too. Then how can we track the medication errors? So usually in the Indian scenario and all over the world, if you're analyzing, there is no proper tracking mechanism for medication errors. Only ISMP, the Institute of Safe Medication Practice, they publish some articles or errors related to the medication errors, and which is actually a main guiding site or guiding protocol for identifying the various types of tools or resources we can identify from the ISMP site. Then other programs like MedWatch, MedMax, and also these are all working in accordance with the ADRs. And if there is any ADR happens, they will check whether it is due to any medication related, it's due to medication error or it's due to an adverse reaction alone. So that is the only mechanism we have to track the medication error. So this is about the medication error report form by USP medication error reporting program. So they'll collect all the information with like whether the reaction error reached to the patient or what type of reaction it was, who are all the staffs involved, so all these kind of informations are included in this form. And this can be a standard form for documenting the medication errors. And this is what I mentioned. So ISMP, so the main, the logo or motto of the ISMP is to promote safer world by preventing the medication errors. So if you go into this site, you can see the tools and resources. So in that, n number of resources are available, n number of tools are also available, like what I told, the lookalike, sound-alike, Tolman lettering, the infusion protocols, everything is available in this, and you can download it and you can convert it into your own settings, the applicable drugs which are in your own settings, and you can frame your own tools. And this is a standard diagram for errors, like Swiss cheese model. So we have several barriers. So we are supposed to do all these monitoring, review, reconciliation, discharge counseling, everything. So if we are failing in any of this, the error, the hazards will reach to the patient. So it's our responsibility to act as a barrier without reaching the harm to the patients. And instead of blaming that person is responsible for an error, it should be considered as an opportunity to assess the practice and find out what went wrong and learn from that mistakes and make changes so that we all can work together to reduce the medication errors. So then only we can reach the target set by the WHO to reduce the errors. So what I am telling is 50% error is nothing. So our aim is to make an error-free environment. So complete error-free environment has to be created by our dedication or sincere work. That is the take-home message. And thank you so much for your patient listening, and let patient care be our motto. So we always we'll see the patients as our own family members, our own sisters or brothers. So then only that intimacy comes from our mind. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, dear Principal Sir, for giving me an opportunity to share my experience. And thank you.